caught my wife cheating at her summer writing workshop, so I hired a PI, got evidence, and disappeared without a trace before she returned. Reflecting on my life, I realized how much of it had been shaped by my pursuit of stability and happiness. I grew up in a modest household, where my parents worked hard to provide for my siblings and me. Their dedication instilled in me a strong work ethic and a desire to build a life filled with love and success. As I moved through my career, I met Lisa, a bright and ambitious woman who seemed to share my values and aspirations. Lisa and I quickly fell in love, and our relationship blossomed into what I believed was a solid partnership. We married within a year, our wedding a celebration of our mutual commitment. In the early years, our life together was everything I had hoped for. We traveled, built careers, and eventually welcomed our two beautiful children into the world. Our friends often commented on how perfect our family seemed, and for a while, I believed it too. However, as time passed, subtle changes began to appear in Lisa's behavior. She became more distant and preoccupied, often citing the pressures of her demanding job. I noticed that our once frequent and heartfelt conversations had dwindled to brief exchanges about mundane daily activities. Despite these signs, I attributed them to the natural ebb and flow of any long-term relationship, never suspecting the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. Our life appeared flawless on the surface. We were the picture-perfect couple with a beautiful home, thriving careers, and two wonderful children. To our friends and family, we had it all. We hosted dinner parties, attended school events, and spent holidays together, radiating a sense of unity and happiness. But behind this facade, there were cracks that only I seemed to notice. Lisa's increasing emotional distance was the most glaring. She would come home late from work, her excuses becoming more frequent and less believable. Our conversations, once filled with shared dreams and laughter, had become strained and superficial. The warmth and connection we once had seemed to be slipping away. I tried to ignore the growing unease, convincing myself that it was just a rough patch, that every marriage had its ups and downs. I made efforts to rekindle our bond, planning date nights and family outings, but Lisa often seemed disinterested or distracted. It felt like I was reaching out to someone who was no longer there, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. Despite my attempts to maintain our perfect image, I couldn't deny that the foundation of our marriage was starting to crumble. The first signs of real trouble came in small, almost imperceptible ways. Lisa's phone, once left carelessly around the house, was now always within her reach, often hidden away or turned off when I was nearby. She began to spend more weekends away, claiming she needed time for personal projects or writing retreats. I wanted to believe her, but the inconsistencies in her stories planted seeds of doubt in my mind. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I suggested we have a movie night like we used to. Lisa agreed, but halfway through the film, she excused herself to make a phone call. I paused the movie, waiting for her to return, but she stayed in the other room for over an hour. When she finally came back, her demeanor was tense, and she seemed on edge. When I asked who she had been talking to, she brushed it off, saying it was just a work call. Despite her evasiveness, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I convinced myself that I was overreacting, that my suspicions were unfounded. I focused on being more supportive and attentive, hoping it would bring us closer again. However, no matter how much effort I put into our relationship, Lisa remained distant. The more I tried to bridge the gap, the wider it seemed to grow, leaving me feeling increasingly isolated and helpless. As the months passed, my growing suspicion became harder to ignore. Lisa's behavior became more erratic, and the excuses for her absences more elaborate. I started noticing things that didn't add up. Unfamiliar names on her phone, hushed conversations, and a sudden interest in late-night outings. Each anomaly added weight to the nagging feeling that something was seriously wrong. One particularly revealing moment came when I found a receipt for an expensive restaurant tucked away in her purse. It was a place we had never been to together, and the date on the receipt was a night she had claimed to be working late. My heart sank as I pieced together the implications, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her without more concrete evidence. The trust we had built over the years was crumbling, replaced by a gnawing sense of betrayal. Determined to uncover the truth, I began to pay closer attention to Lisa's actions. I noticed that she was always texting someone, her face lighting up in a way that hadn't happened with me in years. Her frequent absences and vague explanations no longer seemed like mere coincidences. My gut told me there was more to the story, and I knew I had to find out what was really going on. The reality of our situation was becoming undeniable, and I was finally ready to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The turning point came one evening when Lisa's phone buzzed while she was in the shower. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen and saw a message preview from an unknown number. "Can't wait to see you tonight." My heart raced as I realized this was the proof I had been dreading. When she returned, I confronted her, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. At first, Lisa tried to deny everything, but faced with the evidence, she broke down and admitted to the affair. She confessed that it had been going on for 4 years, sparked by a sense of boredom and a desire for excitement that she claimed our marriage no longer provided. Her words cut through me like a knife, each admission a fresh wound. The emotional impact was devastating. I felt a mixture of rage, sorrow, and betrayal that left me reeling. The woman I had loved and trusted had been living a double life, and everything I thought I knew about our relationship was a lie. As she spoke, I realized that this was not just a betrayal of our marriage, but a betrayal of the family we had built together. The foundation of my life was shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces. As the reality of Lisa's betrayal set in, I became obsessed with uncovering the full extent of her affair. I needed to know every detail, as if understanding it completely might somehow lessen the pain. I started going through her messages, emails, and social media accounts, piecing together a timeline of her infidelity. Each new revelation was like a punch to the gut, confirming just how deeply she had deceived me. The affair had begun innocuously enough. Flirtatious exchanges at her writing workshops, late-night texting that quickly escalated into secret meetings and weekend getaways. I discovered that she had used our family vacations as cover for rendezvous, turning what should have been cherished memories into bitter reminders of her betrayal. The person she had been seeing was someone I had met, someone who had sat at our dinner table and played with our children. The magnitude of her deception was staggering. As I delved deeper, I found explicit messages, photos, and even a diary where she had documented her feelings and experiences. The depth of her infatuation and the lengths she had gone to hide it were almost unbelievable. My feelings of betrayal and anger were compounded by a profound sense of humiliation. How could I have been so blind? The discovery process was excruciating, but it was also necessary. I needed to understand the full scope of what had happened to begin the process of healing, even if it meant confronting the darkest aspects of our relationship. With each piece of evidence, the full extent of Lisa's infidelity became clearer. Armed with this painful knowledge, I felt an overwhelming need to confront her once more, to lay bare the truth she had hidden for so long. I compiled everything I had found, messages, photos, and diary entries, into a single, undeniable collection of proof. I wanted her to see the devastation she had wrought, to understand the depth of her betrayal from my perspective. The night of the confrontation, I laid out all the evidence before her. Lisa's face paled as she realized the magnitude of what I knew. There was no more room for lies or denials. As I spoke, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and sadness, I demanded answers. Why had she done this? How could she betray our family so thoroughly? Her responses were a mixture of regret and defensiveness. She apologized repeatedly, but her apologies felt hollow in the face of the overwhelming betrayal. She tried to explain her actions, citing feelings of neglect and boredom, but nothing she said could justify the pain she had caused. The struggle to come to terms with the truth was immense. I was torn between the love I once had for her and the immense hurt she had inflicted. The reality of our situation was stark and painful, and I knew that the road to healing would be long and arduous. The second confrontation was even more intense than the first. After a few weeks of living apart, Lisa approached me, asking to talk. I could sense her desperation, a stark contrast to the confident, deceitful person she had been. When we sat down, she begged for another chance, claiming she was willing to do anything to make things right. I listened to her pleas, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. She spoke of how she regretted everything, how she had been lost and confused, and how she now realized what she stood to lose. But her words, while earnest, couldn't erase the betrayal. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming, and I struggled to keep my composure. I responded with a mixture of anger and sadness, expressing how deeply she had hurt me and how hard it was to imagine ever trusting her again. I told her that her actions had shattered the very foundation of our marriage, leaving scars that might never heal. Her tears and promises of change did little to assuage my pain. The betrayal had cut too deep, and the road to reconciliation seemed impossibly long and fraught with uncertainty. As we parted that night, I knew that our journey was far from over, and that the decisions we made in the coming days would shape the rest of our lives. The affair's repercussions rippled through our family and close friends, leaving a trail of hurt and confusion in their wake. Our children sensed the tension, their once stable home now a battleground of silent grief and anger. Explaining to them why their mother and I were no longer together without exposing them to the full horror of her betrayal was a delicate and heartbreaking task. They deserved to know the truth, but also needed to be shielded from the pain. Our friends and extended family were also deeply affected. Some were shocked and supportive, while others distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the drama and betrayal that had unfolded. The news spread quickly, and I found myself repeatedly reliving the pain as I explained the situation to those who cared enough to ask. The emotional toll was immense. I battled with feelings of inadequacy, wondering if I had somehow failed as a husband. My self-esteem took a significant hit, and the process of rebuilding it was slow and arduous. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, providing a space to unpack the trauma and begin the healing process. The betrayal had left deep wounds, and while time and support helped, the scars would remain a permanent part of my story.